This time, a woman was found naked and strangled to death.
In 1997, when he was arrested, it sounded like something out of a movie. Suddenly, we had a serial killer. His name was Stewart Boetie Boer Wilken.
In the hidden chapters of crime history, one name stands out as chilling: Stewart Wilken, the South African serial killer whose reign of terror shook the world. Join us as we explore the enigmatic world of one of South Africa's most infamous killers. Stewart Wilken's early life was marked by neglect, violence, poverty, and a disturbing fascination with cruelty. This deadly mix led him down a dark path, leaving a trail of horror in its wake. His sinister story unfolded in the heart of South Africa, with a series of gruesome murders that baffled investigators and sent shockwaves through the nation. Wilken's crimes are not for the faint of heart. They involve cannibalism, sexual abuse, child abuse, necrophilia, and of course, murder. Viewer discretion is advised as we delve into the chilling details of his reign of terror. Welcome back to True Crime Capital. This week we travel to one of my favorite countries in the world, South Africa. Port Elizabeth, often referred to as PE, is known for its beautiful beaches, intriguing museums, and amazing wildlife spots. But what truly sets it apart is the warmth of its people, earning it the nickname, the Friendly City. Interestingly, South Africa holds the unsettling record of having the second highest number of serial killers, following the United States, although this isn't widely known. As we step into the early days of 1997, a disturbing truth emerges in PE. At least 8 individuals had met their end at the hands of a single perpetrator over a 7-year span. Surprisingly, no one had connected these cases until now. Stewart Wilken's case is unlike most serial killers. They often target victims who share particular traits, whether it's their appearance, occupation, or even something as mundane as their choice of footwear. This selection provides them with an emotional release. For example, Ted Bundy preyed on young, attractive women, while Jeffrey Dahmer targeted homosexual men. However, Stewart Wilken deviated from this pattern, as he brutally ended the lives of adult female prostitutes and young adolescent boys. Like all serial killers, there's a deep psychological motive behind his choice of victims. Join us as we delve deeper into this chilling and perplexing tale, exploring the mind of a killer who operated in the Friendly City. A story that leaves us questioning the darkest corners of the human psyche. Stewart Wilken, the man we'll later come to know, was born on November 11, 1966, in Boksburg, South Africa. When he was just 6 months old, he and his 2-year-old sister were abandoned in a phone booth. Luckily, a domestic worker discovered them and brought them to her employer's home. This man, known only as Dupe, subjected the boy to terrible abuse. He burned the boy with cigarettes on his genitals. The boy's food was given to the dogs, and he had to eat with the animals from their bowls. Dupe also engaged in acts of bestiality with his dogs, and the boy had to lick his penis afterwards. During this time, the boy's sister went missing, and he had no knowledge of her whereabouts. This troubling situation persisted for a year and a half. When the boy turned 2 years old, kind neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Wilken, took him into their home out of compassion. He was malnourished and plagued by lice. Mrs. Wilken later confirmed the cruelty the boy had suffered at the hands of Dope. The Wilkens gave him the name Stewart Wilken. In his early school years, the Wilkens relocated from Boksburg, Johannesburg to Port Elizabeth. Stewart faced difficulties in school, both academically and socially. He repeated the 3rd grade 3 times and became a target for teasing when his schoolmates found out that he was adopted. According to Wilken, the teacher didn't intervene on his behalf, and may have even encouraged the other children. In response, Stewart lashed out at the teacher, leading to a severe punishment from the principal. He often bit his stepmother as well as other children. In response to his misbehavior, she would discipline him by confining him to his room, where he sometimes damaged lights and furniture. Wilken claimed that there were occasions when she even resorted to locking him inside a cupboard. He faced terrible consequences for bedwetting. On one occasion, got into a fight with another boy at school, who attacked him. When he defended himself, he was sent home. Wilken remembers that his stepmother didn't support him, leading him to conclude that he had to become his own mother, father, sister, and auntie. Shockingly, at the tender age of 8, he began using marijuana. When he was 9, a deacon invited Stewart to his home one day after Sunday school. There, the deacon SA'd the boy. During the same year, after this incident, Stewart's stepfather died. Stewart's stepmother, feeling overwhelmed by his challenging behavior, sent him to a reformatory where he was punished by being locked up without clothes, and the older boys SA'd him. He often tried to run away, but had to return. After finishing Standard 9, which is grade 11, Stewart joined the army but was released after only 4 months when he attempted to commit suicide. He went to live with his stepmother in Dispatch, which is close to Port Elizabeth. When Stewart was 19, he met his first wife, Lynn, at a nightclub. They had a daughter named Juan on December 25, 1985. Lynn stated that after Wayne's birth, Wilken would only have anal sex with her, often in very uncomfortable positions, which was uncomfortable for her. Stewart later claimed that Lynn got involved in prostitution during this period. Wilken's first known victim was killed in February 1990. The victim was 15-year-old Monty Fico, who was a street or homeless child, a sadly common situation in South Africa. Wilken SA'd the boy at Cilliers Secondary School in Sydenham and strangled him. On October 3, 1990, following a disagreement with his wife Lynn, he left the house to go cool off. This is when he met a 25-year-old prostitute named Virginia Geisman at Russell Road. He paid her and took her to Dagbreek Primary School, where they had sex. He then penetrated her anally. When she complained, he strangled her with her clothing and ejaculated as she died. He left her body in the schoolyard. The marriage with Lynn was troubled. Wilken physically harmed his wife multiple times, and she had him arrested for using marijuana as gender-based violence was not taken seriously in those days. Lynn couldn't endure the mistreatment any longer, so they eventually divorced. Wilken made a promise to himself that he would not engage in sexual relations with a white woman again, fearing that she might be his missing sister. On January 10, 1991, Wilken was solicited by Mercia Papenfuss, a 37-year-old sex worker at the Red Lion Hotel. They went to St. George's Park. When Mercia demanded her payment before intercourse, Wilken flew into a rage and strangled her. Then he SA'd her and left her body in the park. Again, on October 21, 1991, Wilken met a 14-year-old street boy who apparently agreed to have sex with him for 50 rands. Wilken took the boy to St. George's Park. The boy wanted his money, which angered Wilken. Once again as it did with Mercia. The boy tried to flee, but Wilken overpowered him and SA'd him. He ejaculated as he strangled his victim. You see, Stewart was of the view that no one should charge for sex, and anytime a sex worker or a young boy asked for payment before or after sex, it would be filled with rage. Which is rather odd, because it would always be agreed upon beforehand that the arrangement is transactional, especially with sex workers. He met a woman named Veronica who belonged to the colored racial group and already had 2 sons. In South Africa, there are 4 primary racial groups: white of European descent, black, comprising various indigenous tribes, colored, referring to people of mixed race, and Indian, descendants from India. Wilken and Veronica got married and had 2 daughters. This marriage also did not fare too well when Veronica's parents accused Wilken of SA'ing the 2 boys. During this time, he left the house and started living in the woods near Happy Valley. In 1993, somewhere between June and September, Wilken met another young street child and solicited him. They went to Target Kloof, where Wilken SA'd and strangled the boy. He hid the body in the ravine. On July 27, 1995, Wilken killed a prostitute again. Her name was Georgina Boniswa Zweni, aged 42, whom he took to Prince Alfred's Park. He SA'd and strangled her. He was still filled with lust and proceeded SA her with a knife. During Wilken's trial, the forensic pathologist stated that the wound was star-shaped, and it seemed as if the attacker had inserted the knife, withdrawn it, inserted it again, and repeated this action. In total, there were at least 20 stab wounds, including a group of 5 near her navel. He characterized it as a wild knife stabbing. Wilken also cut off her nipples and ate them at the scene. Her clothing was thrown into a fish pond nearby. The initial 6 years stand out as a crucial phase in human development. This time is of great significance for psychosocial growth, especially in building connections with other people. A critical period refers to a specific window of time when a child is biologically prepared and open to acquiring specific skills, behaviors, and capabilities, given they receive the right environmental conditions and stimulation. A critical period is a one-time opportunity. If a child doesn't develop the traits that should emerge during this time, it might become exceedingly difficult or even impossible later on. Attachment is a psychological concept that refers to the emotional connection that forms between individuals, especially between a child and their primary caregiver, typically the mother. This emotional bond becomes evident in the child's positive feelings when near the mother and seeking comfort from her during times of uncertainty and fear. While early researchers initially thought that feeding played a central role in attachment, studies have shown that warmth, comfort, and social interaction are truly significant factors. Research has confirmed the development of attachment between a child and their mother and identified 4 stages in this process. From 6 months to 2 years, a typical child forms a strong attachment to their mother. This is precisely the time when Stewart Wilken was abandoned by his mother. Instead, he ended up with a harsh man who did not show him any love. The way these stages unfold is of great importance for a child's development. A mother who is generally unresponsive and lacks affection toward her child won't facilitate the formation of a healthy and secure attachment in the child. Children with secure attachments can use their mother as a safe foundation to explore their environment, knowing they can return to her when they feel anxious. This helps the child develop the belief that their mother will be there during times of stress, creating a blueprint for all future intimate relationships. Stewart Wilken did not experience this. Instead, he had a caregiver who mistreated, harmed, and demeaned him. Research consistently shows that emotional deprivation during a child's early years has a lasting impact on their personality. As kids grow up, friendships become more and more important. Friendships are not only enjoyable for children, but they're also places where they learn and practice many social behaviors. Through friendships, children come to understand others better, learn to see things from different angles, and move away from thinking only about themselves. This helps them develop empathy and the willingness to help others. Their social skills get better, and they become more adept at interacting with people. Friendships can also be really helpful when dealing with tough times. Stewart Wilken didn't have close friends when he was a child. One reason could be the way he formed attachments. Kids with secure attachments are better at making friends as they grow up compared to those with insecure attachments. Stewart was teased and made fun of by other kids. In such situations, a child often becomes isolated and retreats into their own world, focusing mainly on themselves. To make things even worse, his stepmother sent him to a reformatory. Once again, he experienced rejection from his mother, and he was subjected to further mistreatment by others. Again, he was SA'd by older, more powerful males. Wani was Wilken's daughter from his first marriage, as stated earlier. The last time she was seen was on September 29, 1995, by her half-sister, who was the daughter of Wilken's first wife from a previous relationship. Wilken, who had been married to his second wife for nearly 5 years at that time, was visiting Juan. Later in the day, the half-sister spotted Wilken with Wayne, sitting on a sidewalk about 150 feet from their home. Sadly, Juan was never seen alive again. Wilken stated that he had been concerned about Wani's welfare. Her stepfather was SIing her, and there was not enough food in the house. Wani's half-sister mentioned that there were times when they had no food, and their new stepfather wasn't fond of them. Wilken said Wani told him she wanted to run away. Wilken then brought her to Happy Valley, where there is a garden filled with fairy tale characters like dwarves. Wilken had fond memories of playing there as a child, and it was one of his happiest moments. After leaving his second wife's home, he went to live in the bushes near Happy Valley. Here, Wilken inspected Juan's private parts and found that she was no longer a virgin at the age of 10. I honestly don't believe that a person who is not a medical specialist can just inspect someone and then conclude whether they are still a virgin or not. But then again, this is taken from Stewart's account, so it should be taken with a pinch of salt. He later explained that he wanted to save her from the kind of life that he had had and strangled her, thereby sending her soul to God. He removed her clothes and kept her body, talking to it and sleeping next to it at night. When the body had decomposed, he covered the skeleton with a tarpaulin. He placed her clothes next to him as if they were still being worn. On May 25, 1996, he solicited a 22-year-old prostitute, Katrina Klassen, at the Albany Road interchange. They went down to the beach. Wilken shoved a piece of plastic bag down her throat to keep her from screaming, "S-aid," and strangled her. Somewhere between May and August of 1996, he met yet another street child whom he took to Fort Frederick. After the boy masturbated him, Wilken told the boy to undress and S-aid him. The boy threatened to tell the police, and Wilken strangled him. However, it is clear that he would have killed the boy anyway. But Stewart Wilken finally made a mistake. Ellen Baker's 12-year-old son, Henry Bakers, went missing on January 22, 1997. Ellen initially assumed that Henry had stayed over at his grandmother's house in Missionvale, which was within walking distance from their home in Algoa Park. However, when Henry didn't come back home by Thursday evening, Ellen started to worry. She went to her mother's house on Friday morning, only to find out that Henry had left for home on Wednesday and had been missing for 2 days. The Child Protection Unit was contacted, and Sergeant Ursula Barnard took on the case. She found out that Henry had been with a man named Stewart Wilken after playing with a friend at a nearby park. Wilken was known to Henry and Ellen, and had even lived with Ellen's mother for a while after some marital problems. Sergeant Barnard discovered that Wilken had no fixed address, making it difficult to locate him. However, a colleague informed her that Wilken's daughter, Juan, had gone missing in 1995 and that there were 2 charges of SA being investigated against him. Juan, like Henry, was last seen in Wilken's company. The SA charges were filed by Wilken's parents-in-law in connection with the 2 sons of his second wife, Veronica. On January 28, 1997, Sergeant Barnard finally caught up with Stewart as he was roaming the streets. He was asked about the missing boy. Wilken seemed really worried about the missing boy and wanted to help. He said he had been with Henry for a while on that Wednesday, but didn't know anything about him disappearing. Wilken also claimed he spent the night at a female friend's house, so they let him go. But it turned out that his alibi was not true, and he got arrested again on January 31st, 1997. The Child Protection Unit asked for help from Sergeant Derek Norsworthy, who was trained by Dr. Mickey Pistorius, South Africa's first psychological profiler, to investigate serial murder cases. This training included advanced methods for talking to and interrogating suspects. Sergeant Norsworthy had Wilken come to his office, and Wilken introduced himself as Boetie Boer, the name most people knew him by. Sergeant Norsworthy had Wilken sit in a chair facing a picture of the sergeant's daughter, who was nearly the same age as Juan. Then, he left Wilken alone for a while. When he returned, he saw that Wilken was looking at the picture. Sergeant Norsworthy pointed to the certificates on his wall, showing that he had completed training in investigating serial homicides. Wilken looked at the photo again. Sergeant Norsworthy outright told Wilken that he believed he had killed the 2 missing children. He said he also knew that Wilken had revisited the bodies to fantasize and commit necrophilia. Wilken was silent. Then his eyes drew on slits, and he stretched out his hands. "I am sick," he said. Then, he admitted that he had killed both his daughter, Juan, and Henry Bakers. In fact, he had returned to the decomposing body of the boy that very morning to have sex with it. Regarding Henry Bakers, Wilken said he met the boy in Algoa Park. Wilken took the boy to an open field on the outskirts of Algoa Park. He told the boy to take off his clothes and proceeded to perform fellatio on him. Then he told Henry to lie on his back and he essayed the boy. Henry cried and protested, and Wilken began to strangle him. As the boy died, Wilken ejaculated. Wilken also claimed that Henry's parents were physically hurting him. Just like he had done with Juan, he said he wanted to send Henry's soul to God. Henry's parents admitted they scolded him when he misbehaved and sometimes spanked him on the buttocks. But they denied kicking him, as Wilken had suggested. Wilken then led the police to where he had left the bodies. He showed them the spot behind the Garden Court Holiday Inn, where he had kept Juan's body, and later her skeleton for nearly 6 months. This helped identify the skeleton found there under a blue-green cover on May 22, 1996. Back then, forensic experts could only determine that it was the remains of a young white girl under 12. Afterwards, Wilken took them to where Henry's body was hidden in the bushes near Algoa Park. The boy's body was found infested with maggots. When they returned to his office, Sergeant Norsworthy confronted Wilken once more. He told Wilken he believed there were more bodies. Wilken replied that there were probably at least 10 more victims. He then went on to tell his lawyer everything, confessing to the crimes in great detail. using very offensive language. This confession occupied Sergeant Norsworthy and his fellow officers for months as they tried to find the official files, referred to as murder dockets in South Africa, related to the crimes Wilken had spoken about. Wilken revealed to Sergeant Norsworthy that he had gone back to the bodies of the boys he had murdered. He explained that he applied vinegar and butter to the boys' feet to mask their scent and prevent police dogs from tracking them. He rolled up pieces of newspaper and inserted it into their anuses to keep the maggots out, so that he could commit necrophilia for a number of times after their deaths. He denied having any sexual interaction with his daughter Juan, both before her death and afterwards. Children sometimes cope with bad experiences by imagining themselves in a strong, powerful role. For example, if a child feels like they have no control in their life, if others ignore or reject them, or if they suffer from emotional abuse, they might create a fantasy where they are the ones in charge, rejecting and mistreating others. As an adult, Wilken could understand this. He had felt powerless and vulnerable when he was a young boy. But now, he could relate to the strong person and become the one in control, even if it meant being the one who abuses others. This was a psychological mechanism which alleviated his own painful memories. Wilken described in his confession that he often recalled the deacon essaying him as he walked with the boys he picked up. Where did Wilken's strong dislike for prostitutes come from? Wilken accused his first wife of engaging in prostitution after their daughter Juane was born. He also believed that prostitutes were committing a sin by accepting money for something he thought should be freely given by God to both women and men. This anger might have been redirected from his biological mother for leaving him, his adoptive mother for not meeting his expectations as a mother, or even his wives. It's worth noting that prostitutes have often been targeted by serial killers. For instance, Jack the Ripper, one of the earliest well-known serial killers, preyed on prostitutes. Why? Prostitutes are vulnerable targets. They are readily accessible, willing to engage with potential clients without knowing much about them, and often go unnoticed until their bodies are discovered, especially those working on the streets rather than high-class escorts. There may also be a connection between prostitutes openly embracing their sexuality and filling the fantasies of certain killers. Regardless of the reasons, Wilken has a deep hatred for prostitutes and believes they don't deserve to live. He has shown no remorse for the women he killed. Stewart Wilken liked to face his victims while essaying them so that he could watch their faces as he strangled them. He called their final moments the jelly bean effect. Their eyes would bulge, their lips would swell, and their tongues would stick out of their mouths. It was at this point that he would ejaculate. Professor Tuvia Szabo, who assessed Wilken's ability to stand trial and differentiate between right and wrong, described him as a sadist. Anal rape is typically considered a sadistic act, and Wilken's preference for the jelly bean effect makes it even more so. However, Wilken doesn't fit neatly into the usual sadistic profile. Sadistic individuals often enjoy torturing their victims extensively over a prolonged period, relishing their victims' cries of pain. Wilken, on the other hand, appeared motivated to kill as soon as his victims started experiencing pain, perhaps due to his own painful memories. Despite this, his sadistic pleasure in witnessing his victims, including the boys, die contradicts his claim that he wanted to save them. Nevertheless, this doesn't necessarily disprove his assertion. Serial killers think differently from normal people. While it may appear contradictory from a normal perspective, it may not be contradictory for Wilken. The murder of his daughter is possibly the most disturbing part. By all accounts, Wilken loved Wayne. Her half-sister testified that Wilken and Wayne had a good relationship, that he visited her frequently and brought her presents. She said that he loved her. Both his wives stated that he was very kind at times, particularly toward children, which rather odd as he abused young boys. Why did he kill her? Perhaps he truly believed he was saving her from being sexually abused as he had been. He kept her body close to him even when she was completely skeletalized. He spread her clothes out next to him and talked to her. To this day, he denies having had any sexual contact with her, which may or may not be true. On February 3, 1997, Stewart Wilken appeared in court, facing charges for the murders of his daughter and Henry Baker's. As the months went by, additional charges were brought against him as the police linked the crimes he had confessed to with existing murder cases. In the end, the official list of charges included 10 counts of murder and 5 of SA. Both Dr. Mickey Pistorius and Professor Tuviazabo testified that serial killers, in general, and Wilken specifically, could not be rehabilitated. At one point during the trial, while Dr. Pistorius was testifying, Wilken asked for permission to go to the bathroom. On his way, he signaled to Sergeant Norsworthy that he intended to go masturbate. From this encounter, I believe that there is another aspect of sexual addiction that is not always deliberated upon in this case. His first wife complained about his obsession with anal sex, which he would continue to practice with some of the prostitutes, and all of the boys Wilken's defense didn't challenge 7 of the murder charges and 2 of the SA charges. They argued that there wasn't enough evidence to prove Wilken's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt for the other charges. On February 20th, 1998, Mr. Justice Chris Jansen agreed and found Wilken guilty on 7 counts of murder and 2 of SA. In South Africa, criminal cases are decided by a judge, not a jury. The murder charges were related to Juan, Henry Bakers, Monty Fico, and all 4 of the women. On February 23rd, 1998, Stewart Wilken received 7 life imprisonment sentences. Mr. Justice Chris Jansen said Wilken had to be taken out of the community. If the death penalty had still been an option in South Africa, he would have imposed it. He noted that while almost everyone had turned away from some of the videos shown, Wilken had shown no emotion. Wilken's wife, Veronica, attended the proceedings, and they were reconciled. After the sentence was passed, they spoke for a couple of minutes and parted with a kiss. He was not charged with SA-ing his second wife Veronica's sons, which is rather unfortunate because if the allegations are true, they also deserve justice. A common factor in the childhood of many serial killers is the lack of a proper father figure. Stewart Wilken's biological father left him, and his next father figure, Dope, mistreated him. It seems that Mr. Wilken was kind to Stewart, and he had some affection for him. However, Stewart's stepfather passed away when he was 9 years old, a crucial time when a father figure becomes very important in a boy's life. As a result, Stewart had no male role model to learn how to be a man. Instead, he was SA'd by a deacon from the church. Again, he was confronted with the message, "Men are abusive and take what they want from others." Sergeant Norsworthy managed to find Wilken's biological mother, who had reconnected with Wilken's sister shortly after she had gone missing. The sister later explained that she ran away and was eventually sent to a police station, and that how she was reconciled with her mother. She asked Sergeant Norsworthy to convey a message to Stewart, assuring him that she had not abandoned him and that she loved him, despite her shock about what her son had become. This news deeply affected Wilken, and when they talked on the phone, he referred to her as Mommy, a term he had never used before. It is rather strange. The sister knew exactly where Stewart was when she ran away from Dupe's house. Why couldn't she tell her mother so she can go rescue her son from that abusive environment he was subjected to? I guess we will never know. In a grim twist of fate, Stewart Boetie Boer, Wilken's first wife, Lynn Havenga, was brutally attacked and killed with a brick. It appears she had walked to a phone booth to call her third husband, Hermanus Havenga. According to Havenga, his wife was accompanied by one of her children from a previous marriage. Havenga recounted that 3 men approached them, seized her, forced her into a car, and quickly sped away. The woman's lifeless body was discovered near the salt pans in Mission Vale in June 2005, 7 years after Stewart's sentencing. May her soul rest in peace. Stewart Wilken is presently in St. Albans prison. It is said that he has been experiencing hallucinations and false beliefs of being targeted for years. He thinks that the spirits of his victims are haunting him. According to Dr. Pistorius, because he can no longer act as the one in control, he has returned to feeling like the one who is being harmed. Please share your thoughts on this case in the comments. If you found this video informative, consider becoming a part of the TCC community by subscribing to the channel. Stay safe out there.